We have a financial advisor on our show today, and you're going to want to hear all of what he has to say, and especially some of his book recommendations.
It's a conversation with money, talking to you about how it wants to be treated as if money was a real person, and how it wants to
Mm.
be treated and handled and loved and respected.
Welcome to 365 Brothers. I'm your host, Robin Shine. This podcast introduces you to Black men from across the United States, their wisdom, their experiences, their joys. It also shares some of the triumphs after diversity. Basically, this podcast is about the humanity of Black men, just as it could be about the humanity of women, of white, of brown, of yellow. I focus on Black men in this podcast because of the statistics, the facts that Black men are more likely to be stopped by the police without a justifiable cause. Now, if you're questioning that, this podcast is the place for you to be. I ask each man the same 11 questions, and one of them asks about their interactions with law enforcement. The point of that question is to show the commonality in who is stopped, regardless of profession, regardless of age. Now, the other thing is to just share the diversity of experiences of Black men outside of what you see on TV, in movies, outside of the stereotypes and the tropes. This is 365 Brothers. Welcome. Now, if you're wondering, it is a subtle process. So don't just listen to one episode. I recommend listen to 5. When you listen to at least 5, you get it. You will truly get it. And after that, you'll either be hooked or not. But this is a 5-episode minimum, so get ready, get comfy. Today, we're speaking with a social entrepreneur who hails from Riverside, and he specializes in wealth building strategies that empower others. We're speaking with Bert Wright. Welcome, Bert.
Well, thank you, Robin, for having me on today. A little bit about myself. I have currently lived in Southern California almost my entire life. Was a military brat in some ways. My father was involved with the military many years ago. So although I actually was born overseas, I've lived in the United States since I was 6 months old. Happily married to my beautiful wife of over 9 years. We'll be celebrating 10 years this year. And I just really have just a passion for serving others and making a difference in my community, which I really learned from my father. My father was my best role model as far as giving back to the community and making a difference. So I'm glad to be here and share some words of wisdom, hopefully.
Fantastic. Well, let's dive on in. What is a favorite song or movie, either now or all time?
I was talking to my wife about it the other day, and I remember back in college, this will sound kind of weird. I used to like to watch The Lion King, the original Disney movie, many
Mm-hmm.
times. And I think it's because it just reminded me of the journey as us as people, or as a young person, as a young man trying to find yourself and find myself. After his Simba's father gets killed, and Simba's trying to figure out who is he to find himself in many ways, only to return back to the original source. Why the movie stood out, because I understand that as a young man in college, young person growing up, I was just trying to find myself. So that's I'll probably say that's probably my most memorable movie that stands out.
You mentioned that you watched it, a lot when you were in college. Was it about, something like not being sure about your major or not sure? What was the thing that you were kind of like trying to work out?
Well, definitely. I was at a point in my college career where I was in between majors. I was deciding if I wanted to go on a particular path. I started on the career path, initially wanted to go into the pre-med route, the science route. I still have a love for science, but I wasn't sure that was really what I wanted to be. It was more about peer pressure and more about my own personal desires and dreams to become a doctor or be a scientist. And after some further self-reflection and discovery, I realized I can still love science, but it doesn't mean I have to make a career out of it. So I ended up going into the education profession and serving others in teaching and training others as a lifestyle and as a career path. So that really was probably what stuck out to me. I realized I had to find my own path and be okay with that and be willing to even tell my own parents that this path, this dream passion of wanting to be a doctor was not what excited me. It wasn't what woke me up in the morning. So that's probably the reason why the movie stands out in so many ways.
That's awesome. I love that. I remember having the same experience thinking because I could be an engineer, then therefore I ought to. And it's like, no, I don't think so. So I totally get it. And I love, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
What's a favorite childhood memory?
One that stands out was two things. One was the first time I used to have a paper route. I know for some of your listeners who are maybe a little younger, there was a time when young kids would actually still get on their bike and deliver the newspaper to neighbors. And at that time, for a young kid making $300, $400, $500 a month, I thought I was on top of the world. I remember getting a stack of papers to my house. I'd have to fold them, put them together, put in my newspaper sack, put the sack on top of me, get on my little BMX bike and ride around the neighborhood. I think I probably did about 5 or 6 blocks. And I have to do it every 5 days a week, get home from school, deliver those papers. And one lesson I learned from that was two things. The importance of good customer service. Subscription for the paper was the same, was standard for everybody. And part of my job was collect the subscription and then mail it back to the newspaper company. But I also realized the importance of customer service because my dad would say, if you go above and beyond, people will recognize that. And sometimes they more often will compensate you for that. So I receive above and beyond tips because my goal was every person that had a house, I will put the newspaper on their front door versus just throwing it into the driveway. So think about that. If you don't have to go into your driveway to get your newspaper, but it's on your front door when you get home or whatever time you open your door to receive that, it may seem small, but it's an extra layer of customer service that resulted in higher tips, over the course of a month. So that stands out. One of my best childhood stories.
I was just shaking my head from left to right as you were talking with a smile on my face because one of my favorite things back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean I think I was still getting a daily newspaper delivered up until, at least 2009 or 10. And I always knew when my regular person delivered and when someone was a substitute, because the substitute, it would be, 2, 3, 4 stairs away. It would be, it just, sometimes it's such a little thing, but I always knew, and it didn't even occur to me to tip my newspaper delivery person until I got one that was so outstanding. It was like, oh, okay, I got to leave something for you at Christmas time, And so I just love that you shared that. It's
customer service always pays dividends in the end, no matter what you're doing, what a professional end, it always pays out in the long term.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Let's talk about accomplishments. So I asked this question in 2 parts. I'd love to hear an accomplishment that means the most to you personally, and then an accomplishment that gets the, oh, or what? Wow. So let's start with the first. What's an accomplishment that means the most to you personally, Bert?
From a personal level, if there's one accomplishment that means a lot to me, and it's an inner one, which I would say is recognizing that I am worthy and I'm really off the chain. What did I mean by that? I think so often we operate in this imposter syndrome that we're not worthy of certain abundance or certain platforms or benefits or blessings.
Mm-hmm.
And being okay to accept that I am worthy of those blessings, and being okay to saying, hey, you know what, I deserve those blessings, those opportunities for any number of reasons. Sometimes we may come with an group of environments that we're kind of not really positive or encouraging or inspiring for a number of different reasons. And so we just settle for just being mediocre, and we downplay how good and how great we are. And so, which leads into your second part of that question, as far as a professional accomplishment that came as a result of that. So I lead a sales team that's all volunteer based, and they're global, which means they range from here in California to the East Coast to parts of Europe to parts of the Middle East and South Africa in between.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've stepped into allow myself to say that I'm worthy and I really am capable of doing great things, under my leadership, that volunteer sales team has generated over $3+ million in revenue for a company I'm associated with. That came because of me wanting to acknowledge and step into my higher level of greatness as a person. And for many people, that they would think the idea of having a volunteer sales team that can generate over multiple seven figures around the world is pretty amazing. So that's probably one of my greatest professional accomplishments, I would say, for myself, is knowing I've been able to can do that virtually and in person. I've done it both ways.
Got it. And so that's the one that gets the wow when they hear that. Yeah. I mean, I'm like,
Right.
really?
Yeah,
So
it gets the wow. It gets the wow. Yes.
it's got mine. Well, let me just follow up with a couple things. The first one is there's a podcast called Please Don't Kick Me Out. And I was interviewed on that, and it was a conversation about imposter syndrome. Wow. It's so common. And I've had other guests who've talked about that. I would love
Right.
to know what you believe made the difference for you. Was it an experience? Was it something you read? How did you overcome it? Because in all honesty, I find that it still creeps up for myself, and I know it creeps up for other people who are listening.
So I think I was watching a YouTube video from a speaker or somebody, and one thing that I started doing for the past probably year and a half is what I called a powerful self-talk exercise every morning. And so what I actually use you can go to office supply store, Staples or Office Max, and you can buy these spiral bound index cards.
Mm-hmm.
So every morning, about at least 5 days a week, I put the date, the day and the date, whatever. And I start the day with my powerful self-talk tells me. Once again, my powerful self-talk tells me ... And I have about 5 to 8 statements I say 5 days a week. From, hey, I'm worthy of abundance. I am a leader other wants to follow. I am a great steward of my finances. And I've been doing it now for at least a year plus, not a year and a half. And it may seem minor. It takes no more than 5 minutes, give or take. I kind of resonated with it. I do that preferably in the morning, but if not in the morning, I do it in the evening. And, at some point during the day, I'm going to get that exercise done. What I found is that it has helped to change my own vibrational energy and how I resonate about myself and out into the world. And over time, I've begun to believe that my own self-talk is more powerful than other people's talk, what they say about myself. And so whenever I find I'm having an issue with either some negative self-chatter or some imposter syndrome, I go back to my positive self-talk and I start asking myself, am I needing to reprogram my belief system or subconscious? And then about a couple days a week, not as much as I used to, but about a couple days a week, I would engage in some sort of mirror talk. I would say, hey, you're worthy of this. You deserve this. It may seem kind of weird in the beginning. It just transforms who I am. And that exercise by itself has made all the difference. Did I answer your question, Robin? Did that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've already in my mind imagined where my nearest Office Max is, and I'm like, okay, that's one to try. And I used to have practices like that, but then I don't stick to them. And so I am in awe that you have kept it up.
Right.
And I mean, I can just say that in your speaking, you can hear that powerful vibration, that confidence, that certainty, and it comes across.
That is, was and is the driving force to keep me doing the exercise every day. And then at some point, and this is the second part of that equation, that self-talk begins to manifest in a real world with opportunities. So it almost begins to reinforce what you're already doing. In the beginning, you may not see anything. It may take 3 months, it may take 4 months, it may take a year, depending on where you are in your own personal journey. But at some point, trust me, it will begin to manifest in the real world. Private victories always precede public victories.
Before I took on this podcast of interviewing 365 men, 365 brothers, I just decided I wanted to try on 365 poems. It was just a challenge, something to do. So I did a poem a day. And then I was like, I missed it after a few months and when it was done. And so then I did 365 doodles. And that one took 16 months instead of 12, but I did complete it. And my point is doing those little things allowed me to, when this idea came into my head, to have the confidence to say, oh, I can do it. And so I just want to reinforce that practices. It's the practices. It goes back to what you were saying about customer service. It's like these character traits that seem so small, they really do build our success.
Right. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then I would love for the listeners to get to know a little bit about this social entrepreneurship, this business that you've created. Is there something you could share just so they have a sense of it?
I help them develop people who are planning for retirement or wealth building strategies in the financial services sector. I'm an independent agent advisor. And so for myself, entrepreneurship has always been kind of in my blood. My dad was an entrepreneur for almost my entire life. My mom had a daycare for many years. She's been a hairstylist now for 25 plus years. So for me, their model of entrepreneurship is always about how can we give back and make a difference. And so I've taken that on as good business is still doing good stuff in the world. And doing good is good business. Regardless what vehicle entrepreneurship I may decide to involve myself in, my ultimate goal is to make a difference, first, within my household, and two, secondly, in the community I serve. So I just love helping develop people, teaching people, sharing people, training people, developing people. As I mentioned previously, I'm actually a school teacher by professional training. So because of that, I have that background, that expertise and skill sets. So I understand the value of teaching. I have a fair amount of clients who are school teachers because I have a heart for that, because I understand a lot of my teachers are not properly prepared for retirement. They serve others. It's always as who's going to serve them and be an advocate for them in many ways. And so I just love making a difference. On my epitaph or on my headstone, you can say, he came to serve, and that's probably what I would say.
That's delightful. What's your favorite quote, saying, metaphor, or book?
I always say, especially in Southern California, I always say the next day, I love how the air smells after it rains. I really do. I love how the air smells after it rains here in Southern California. And I realized, like, the smog is cleared. There's no more dirt in the air. It just smells fresh and crisp. There's electricity to the air. It's kind of just like, it's exciting. Like, I love the smell of the rain the day after it rains.
I can smell it right now as you say it. I'm like, because I know exactly what you're talking about.
I mean, the air feels just fresh, invigorating. I mean, you can just sense, like, there's a certain sense of, like, aliveness to the world the day after it rains. Like, I want to be outside the day after it rains. Metaphorically, I mean, it can go so many different ways, obviously. Just the idea that sometimes after a storm, there's a renewedness to your life in many ways, right? Or renewedness to an opportunity in many ways. So we can go as deep as we want to there, but definitely for me, that's probably feels like, I feel like there's a renewedness in opportunities and renewedness in the world after rains. So that's probably my favorite quote.
I love it. I was in the grocery store and the clerk said something. We're just, back and forth chit chat. I don't really like chit chat, but that's what it was at first. And she said something about, this COVID era and all that's going on. And I said, well, here's the good news. After this year and
Right.
after 2020 and whatever's happening next, get ready for a couple of years where it's just blessing after blessing after blessing, because everything's cyclical.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, we can take it even farther than that. If you study history in some ways, depending on what happens after this year, next couple of years, a lot of people compare this current environment to the 1918 Spanish flu, which preceded the Roaring '20s. So I don't know, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
So I always ask people, what are you doing to plan for your opportunities in the midst of an obstacle? Because it is there. If you look for it, and it will after the fact. So don't wait till after the fact. Start planning for your opportunities.
Yes. So let me ask you, is there a person, conversation, moment, or event that stands out as either changing the trajectory of your life or had a significant impact on your life?
Yes. I say it because sometimes I feel like it sounds like a cliche, but I'll say it. The day I got married to my wife, it even goes past the part of us getting married. When we first got married, she knew I had entrepreneurial desires and wanted to be an entrepreneur. But at some point, we had some trials, tribulations, kind of getting the business off the ground. There were some tough times, and that somewhere in that journey, she had said yes to an opportunity to volunteer with the Lisa Nichols brand and said yes to being involved on the Lisa Nichols campus in many ways. Now, I've always been involved, always been a proponent for personal development, but I just really kind of let that be her space. Little did I know that her saying yes would have such a ripple effect on myself. Because of that, her saying yes, me saying yes to my wife, and her saying yes to the opportunity allowed me to be around other individuals that were thinking bigger and further along than I thought was possible. So that probably is the most significant opportunity event in my past 10, 15 years of my life. Those two things right there. So yeah.
Got it. Who is your wife for you?
My wife is my safe space. She's my friend. She's my ride or die. Wife, love, a business partner, everything in between. Person I'm gonna have fun with, I can crack jokes too. I'm gonna have almost in-depth, intimate conversations with, and in doing such a way where I don't have to feel like I have to decrease my masculine power in doing that, but I can still be who I am in my most authentic self. And she holds the space for that for me. And I definitely I lucked out on that side of the bargain. So I would say I'm the lucky man.
Awesome. That's great. I love hearing things like that. That's just, as I'm sure everyone does. So let me ask you this. What is a moment or event that highlights your experience as a Black man in the United States?
For me, it started in junior high. So I think I mentioned in the introduction, I lived in Southern California most of my life, or almost my entire life. For the first 12, 13 years in part of South Central LA. And predominantly a neighborhood that's very Black and brown. Most of my teachers were Black and brown. So really, if you were to say, Bert, who were you? I would just say, I'm Bert. At some point, unfortunately, through different, activities in my neighborhood, my parents felt it was a need to leave our neighborhood and move to another community, which was 75 miles away. That community was not as diverse. I went from being a predominantly a neighborhood that was Black and brown, Blacks and Latinos, to now predominantly a white Caucasian neighborhood. So I went from my first day in school, I was the Black kid in the school. Why was that important from that experience as a Black person in America? Because prior to age 12 or 13, if you said I was Black, it was a descriptive term. It was just a physical attribute of who I had and who I was. Going to predominantly a white school, a white town, when people called me Black, that's who they define me as. So that's a
Mm.
psychological shift from going to be described as being Black. It's just merely a physical attribute to now being defined as Black, and a lot of things that come with that, because I'm in a community where they saw Blackness as less than or had certain beliefs about that. I didn't experience that prior to the 13 years moving to this other city. So that's probably my biggest, most noticeable experience as a Black man in America, for experience and shift.
And what was that like for you? Like, is there a moment that stands out when you were called that and you got the impact or what that was? Like, how did you deal with that? Because you're 13, you're not 25 or 30.
Well, definitely. I mean, it was the first time I was ever referenced, by the N word. As a teenager, it took me back. I was taken aback by it. Like, what does that mean? It just like, okay, like I used to have white classmates that would say, Bert, I really don't like N words, but you're okay. One of the good N words. I said, well,
Oh,
like, what does that mean? So I remember telling my dad, asked my dad, he said, my dad went to a segregated high school. So he gave me some perspective and he said, son, it really is just some hurt people hurt people. And unfortunately, they're only sharing what they've been taught so far. So just show up and show out and shine brighter than everybody else, and then go for that. And so I was very fortunate that my dad, instead of using it as a negativity, was like using it as a means of motivation, just to show up and be better than I could, to be the best version of myself, and just be proud of my culture. So that, hearing that back then, definitely was a shift across how I thought about kidding and showing up in different things. And I strove to be the best version of myself, regardless of the cultural environment I'm in.
what I love about what your dad said to you is that it hurt people,
Mhm.
it takes any it takes the burden of that completely off of you. Like it's
Yes.
so affirming that, look, they got issues. It's like it puts it squarely
Right.
where it belongs. So many conversations we have are about, when will, like this thing about being African American, about being Black, when will people
Mhm.
get it? And it's like basically it's such a shift to just go, wow, what is wrong with these people that can't see our humanity versus something for us to prove. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Right. Correct.
Mm.
Correct.
So, have you had any interactions with law enforcement, Bert? If one or two to share, or not, or yeah, tell us about your experiences with law enforcement.
When I saw the question, I initially or instinctively went to a negative interaction with law enforcement. And I realized
Mm-hmm.
I actually have friends that are in law enforcement. And so I almost
Mm-hmm.
bypassed the fact that I have good friends that are actually law enforcement officers.
Mm-hmm.
So the deeper question I asked myself, as a Black man in this country, when I think of law enforcement, do I always assume it's going to be a negative interaction? And I
Mm-hmm.
can point to clear examples in my personal circle that have police officers, law enforcement, ATF, different levels of law enforcement, that are great people, and we actually barbecue together, have friends, have fellowship together.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I don't have a lot of interaction with law enforcement beyond that. So there's this interesting dichotomy I'm struggling with, because when I drive down the street, I still get tense when I see cops, in on the street sometimes. So I may not have a personal direct interaction, but because I see them down the street, or maybe they have to be behind my car, or have to be, behind me in the same lane or a lane over. There's a certain level of anxiety I have, and then they pass on by, and the anxiety goes away. But in my
Mm-hmm.
personal environment, the people I know who work for law enforcement, they're just good friends. So, did I answer your question? I'm not quite sure, but that kind of gave me some things to think about. Now you asked the question
Absolutely.
now.
You know what? And this is the thing, because I don't actually say, have you had any negative interactions? It just says, have you had any? And and
Right.
as I've said to many guests, that where there not every Black man has had a negative interaction, and I share with them whenever they say that, because it's almost in some ways it's almost apologetic, like, nah, that I'm
Right.
not one of the brothers who had to suffer that. And it's
Right.
It's like it would be completely disheartening for me if every single interview of 365 was,
Right.
yeah, guns were
Right.
drawn. And I have learned
Right.
that guns are
Right.
drawn way more than I thought, but it would be a whole different world if it happened to every brother. So I'm glad it didn't. But also in your answer,
Right.
I think a listener can hear that because of what does happen on just the number of occasions that it
Right.
is, whether it's 20%, 30%, whatever it is, that ripples out and has an impact on every brother, most brothers, I won't say every, but it has an impact on brothers whether or not they themselves have had that
Right.
experience. So
Yes.
if the United States was a woman, whether mother, lover, child, friend, neighbor, stranger, whatever, with whom you could speak,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say to her?
Ooh, this is a good one. Well, regardless of whether she's your mother, woman, daughter, or sister, I think it's the same statement across the board that I would say, which is, I think I want to love you. I don't feel like you want to love me back.
Mm,
My impression is that you need me and desire me as a Black man, but the way I receive it on the other side appears to be schizophrenic. And one moment you love me, on another moment you want to push me away. So if I was to tell you how I truly felt, that if I had another option as a woman or to a woman, I may
mhm,
start looking in other locations or other opportunities. Nevertheless, America, if you're a woman, I actually like you just enough, but I'm not sure where I really stand. And I want to see, can we be more than just what we currently are settled on right now? That's what I would say if America was a woman.
mm. Yeah. I like the way that you acknowledge the ambivalence that can come
Mhm.
in. It's like I think many, 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 many people of color can relate, and not just
Right.
people of color. I can only speak to that because that's who I am. But yeah, I love how you
Right.
captured the want to love, the want to have it be a significant relationship.
Right.
What is love to you,
Yeah.
Bert?
Love. So many ways to say about love. I'll start with the cliche and I'll say it in other ways. Love is definitely a noun and a verb, but love is intentional. No matter what you're involved with, whether it's love for your occupation, your journey in life, um, loving yourself, loving a loved one, a spouse, a friend. So at some point, love needs to be intentional, and it is a process that requires constant work.
Mm,
And so love is boundaries. Love is excitement. Love is know when to say yes and then know when to say no. Love can be fun. Love can be sexy. So, but in each of those situations, at some point, there had to be a level of being intentional about making those things happen. So I say love is intention. That's what I got.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true because it's so easy to focus on the experience of it and, like the benefits of it versus there are choices that are made along the way. And it's those choices that create love, just like there are
Right.
choices we make that push it away or deny it's there.
Hmm.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Bert, what is something you've learned through your profession, training, experiences, or your adventures that you believe more Black men should know but don't? And realizing that whatever you say benefits everyone, but specifically something more Black men should know.
Well, that's an easy one. I would probably break it down to three different areas. First two are very personal to myself, and I think any Black man can relate to this. One is as Black men, we are worthy of a safe space to just be, however that means for us as Black men, whether that is a place to just talk, relax, joke, different things, have those conversations about that. We're worthy of having a place just to be that celebrates who we are. The second thing is important is recognizing that our mental health matters to us. And I know in this current environment, mental health is beginning to take more of a center stage in many ways, but I still think we don't give ourselves the permission to take care of our own mental and spiritual well-being. I say this respectfully. This is not to disregard or diminish the importance of the Black church, but sometimes even beyond just the church environment when it comes to having a space to take care of our own mental and spiritual well-being or our well-being and making our health a priority. On a quick side note, there's a group of brothers I have here in Riverside, and we get together about 5 days a week, and we go for a walk, for about 4 to 5 miles every morning, for about an hour and a half. This is the most mentally well, I've had brothers say, look, I come here just for the mental health aspect of what we do. And the walking is fun. It's almost like a walking barbershop. I kind of coined this phrase, the walking barbershop, because we need a space just to be who we are and just a fellowship wherever it is. So that's the two things I would say. The last thing, and I'm maybe being selfish because I didn't know it myself, is the importance of financial education and financial literacy. I was a school teacher for many years. Even though my dad was a successful entrepreneur for many years of my life before he passed away, nothing in what he taught me was about financial management and financial literacy. I literally had to learn it when I entered the industry. And so I always share my story with people and say, I didn't know what I didn't know. And if we just understood the importance of being financially literate, doesn't mean you have to leave a job, doesn't mean you want to start your own business. It just means you have an idea of how your money works for you personally. What does that look like? So that we could best provide for ourselves, and for those that decide to have a family, we could best provide for our household as well there too. But financial literacy and financial management is probably the biggest lesson I've learned, and I wish more Black men would know, because what I've learned is that as so goes a Black man, so goes a Black community. Mm-hmm. And when us as brothers have a great degree of financial stability, mental and emotional stability, our community thrives and benefits from that in more ways than none, which I think in many ways is why there is this fear that as Black men have a great degree of mental, emotional well-being and financial well-being, there's a certain fear that other cultures may not be as dominant anymore in many ways. And so take care of our mental health, take care of our spiritual health, definitely take care of our physical health, and then take care of our financial health. And those 4 areas by themselves will lead us to have a great deal of success for our community and beyond, and for generations to come. Those are probably my lessons I wish to share. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. There was something I read back in my 20s about, making sure you put 10% away, pay yourself first, all that stuff. And I did not do that. I didn't start that until I was in my 30s, even though I was exposed to it. And one of the things that made a difference for me, that really kind of changed how I looked at my finances and took responsibility for my retirement, was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I didn't stop there. I started, reading all kinds of stuff. So for me, that book was a great gateway into seeing how I think about money and how I was raised to see money versus, and then I went on and read his, cash flow, the 4 quadrants. I can't remember the exact title. And I mentioned that because those made a difference for me. I wonder for you, could you maybe name 1, 2, or 3 books just quickly that you would recommend? Since building wealth is such a big deal, like point some brothers who are listening where they might start.
There is one called Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice, which is kind of co-authored with Dennis Kimbro.
What? I didn't. I feel like this is the first time I heard. I read Think and Grow Rich. What? Okay. Yeah. You got to say it again, because I started screaming before you could get it all out.
So, Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. and it's in many ways co-authored by Dennis Kimbro. It is still the original book written by Napoleon Hill. What Dennis Kimbro does, he uses some of the Black experience into the book of Think and Grow Rich. So I recommend that one. That one definitely. It's been around for quite some time, probably at least over. I actually have it here on my desk. 15, 20 years old. I recommend that one. The second one I recommend is a book I was actually read this year. A friend of mine recommended to me. It's called Love Money, Money Loves You. And the author is Sarah McCrum, McCrum.
I always put links to stuff like that in the show notes. So I will put a link to that.
So basically, it's a conversation with money, talking to you about how it wants to be treated as if money was a real person, and how it wants to be treated and handled and loved and respected. One of the biggest things we struggle with money in the community, we always treat money as a master or servant, but really money is just a tool to what you want to do with your life. And then if there's a third book I'd recommend, I think you guys said it already, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think it's the foundational information by Robert Kiyosaki. It's a good way to get the wheels turning, start thinking differently about money. What does it mean to have money? How do you review your assets versus liabilities? I think between those three books will give you a good foundation for us how to just start navigating your money conversations, your money blueprint with that, and then go from there. And then if I get one piece of advice, I would say for anybody who listens to your listeners is just find a competent financial professional that's willing to educate you and not sell you. You want somebody that's going to take the time to educate you and not sell you, because many financial professionals, make a living doing this. I get it. I understand. I'm in the profession as well there too. But I always believe if you do, as I mentioned earlier, doing good is good business. So if you treat somebody well with respect and teach them and educate them, the universe will always pay you back. So don't always sit with somebody who's trying to make a buck right away.
Nice. Thank you so much. And then would you like to share your business?
If they want to connect with me, thank you, Robert, for the opportunity for your listeners who want to connect with me. We can do a couple ways. One is I am on Instagram at Mr. Wright Business. I'm very active on LinkedIn at Bert Wright on LinkedIn, and I have a website which is www.the-right, my last name, protection.biz. So the right business, the right protection.biz. So you can find me there and connect with me there. If you got any questions, reach out to me. I'm more than happy. And anybody from your show, reach out to me. Just let me know that they got my name from your show, and I'll be more than happy to service them. Answer any questions they may have. Like I always say, I'm somebody who's going to give you some answers and tell you the truth when it comes to your financial situation. Now, I'm very transparent. I always say I would love to have your business, but if I can just educate you, then I've done my job. And I always believe that the universe, or God, as I call him, will take care of me, and I'll be more than happy. I'll be okay. I'm more of a teacher than I am a salesperson. So a lot of my clients say, "Bert, you just teach and educate us." And I mean, you obviously, make your pitch, but they know that I'm at least trying to give them the best answer I know. If I don't know it, I'm gonna refer it out or different things. So,
well, I can hear that you're passionate about it. I mean, it's very clear that you're passionate about it.
Yeah, especially for our community, Rob. When it's a 10-to-1, 13-to-1 ratio of wealth building strategy, wealth in our community versus others, you're just going, it's almost intentional.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
So here's the last question. So now that we've had this conversation, what did you get for yourself personally out of participating in this conversation?
So for 2021, my mantra for this year is show up more. So despite being a salesperson and being a leader and in other ways, I still have very strong introvert tendencies. And so I will hibernate and bunker down to a little cave. And I realized I need to show up more often in public platforms. And people have asked me to be on public platforms and show up and be present. And so what this did for me was the chance to kind of test my muscle. So you're the first, opportunity here in 2021 is just to say, hey, I'm going to show up and just be present and just enjoy the ride. Don't put any pressure on it. I'm not trying to make a sale. I'm not trying to quickly build a brand. It just show up and enjoy the ride. So for me, that was, I got out of it. And that was beneficial, just to show up more.
Fantastic. Oh, I love that. There have been a couple brothers that I've interviewed, and then they've gone on and have done more interviews because they discovered it wasn't so bad, and it fills my heart when brothers go on and they just continue to share themselves in new ways with what they have to offer. So
right.
I thank you for taking the time. And at the end of each interview, I'm always left with a certain experience of each brother. And I acknowledge you for being a man of choice and intentionality. It's so clear that you whether or not you would say you're deliberative, it's clear that when you make any choice in your life, it is with intention, from the walking with the brothers and creating that space, seeing opportunities and then seizing them. And even in the way that you love your wife, it's so clear that you live from choice to choice to choice in a way that builds your life. And I just acknowledge you for being an intentional man.
Thank you. I received that, Robin. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to 365 Brothers. Certainly hope you enjoyed the episode. I encourage you to subscribe. Please leave a review. I want to know what you think. Also, if you know someone who would be a fantastic guest for 365 Brothers, please direct them to our website, 365brothers.com. You'll also find all the episodes there, 365brothers.com. And your support is welcome. And remember, to listen is to love.